Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Amaazen Outdoors. This podcast is being presented by Upland Outfitters, home of the Relentless pants, man. Those things are awesome. I had them out this week, and I pretty much, since I started the partnership with Jason, have been wearing those pants out anytime over the summer here where I had to do any work at the farm or dog training. I've even had them on the boat a little bit. They are tough as nails. I have yet to see a pull 'em thread. I've been in some nasty briars. They really held up a lot better than I thought. I can't recommend them enough. Hunting season is around the corner. Make sure you use discount code Amaazen, and I believe Jason is still offering 20% off on the Relentless pants. So pick up a pair before hunting season is upon us, and you're out in the woods with a pair of ripped up pair of pants and sweating, unnecessarily, because Jason's pants and the Relentless pants are top notch and breathable, light. So you're going to want them this early season. Make sure you get them now. I also have a quick announcement. We've got another kind of temporary partnership with Chippewa River Custom Rods. Tom is going to be offering 10% off with discount code Amaazen 10. Amaazen 10, and it's all caps. If you decide to call him for a custom rod, just make sure you tell him that you heard about custom rods on Amaazen Outdoors podcast, and he will make sure that you get hooked up with a discount. All that information for both sponsors and partners are going to be in the show notes, so please support the podcast and these great companies. They are really good partners for the podcast, and I would like to see our listeners support them as well. So look them up, Uplnd Outfitters and Chippewa River Custom Rods. Enjoy today's show. Welcome back to the Amaazen Outdoors podcast. I got a good episode today. We keep trying to make this shift into bird hunting. Oh wait, it was supposed to be fishing. I don't know. I just love birds, and the community is great, and they keep wanting to come on the show, or at least responding to my email. So I've got Mike from the Ruffed Grouse Society. We're going to talk a little bit about local habitat projects and some things going on the national scale for the Ruffed Grouse Society and American Woodcock Society. welcome to the podcast, Mike. You're with the Ruffed Grouse Society. We've had somebody already on from the Ruffed Grouse Society, so I'd like to take a little bit of a deeper spin. I think we've got some great topics to discuss. Can you give the listeners a little introduction to yourself?
Absolutely, Brian. And first, thank you so much for having me. It's always a privilege to get to sit down and talk with folks about what we're up to and where we're headed.
I got a big love for grouse, and you guys do a great job in a lot of the covers that I hunt. So I've got a big fond respect, and I appreciate you guys returning the favor to me and coming on the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. No, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you. It's great. Like I said, anytime we can connect with folks and share what we're up to, particularly this year, it's our 60th anniversary. So it's an opportunity to look back on all we've accomplished and even more so to look forward to what's ahead. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you today.
Likewise. So what do you do with the Ruffed Grouse Society, and how'd you kind of get involved with them?
Yeah, it's a great, somewhat circuitous question, so I'll try to pare it down. My role currently, I'm the Director of Regional Development for the Southeast, primarily. So our southeastern states being Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, in Georgia, primarily. But so I believe you had Mark on right when you first started the podcast.
That's right. Yeah.
So Mark recently retired after 20 plus years with the organization. So I've stepped up and have been doing some work in the state of Minnesota as well.
I might have to hit you up for his number because somehow I misplaced it, and now I can't get a hold of him now that he's retired. So we'll have to talk later.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I can definitely get that your way. And so working on those types of things, also, being obviously a smaller nonprofit, wearing a lot of hats, so working on a variety of different things. Do some work with our corporate partners and some big, exciting projects for the organization that will come out probably in the next probably 2022. I think some folks will start seeing some really new and exciting things from the organization.
Awesome. So, what kind of dog you're on, and kind of what do you call your local home hunting range?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm currently looking down from my office chair at three very asleep dogs. I have two German short hairs, one that is very retired at 16, and one up and comer that is 11 months old. And then the third one is a wire hair that is the tried and true veteran of the group. She is 9. So I waited a little long to get a puppy, but the duo for now is serving me well. I'm trying to work on another one. The 16-year-old is still in decent enough shape to get around and whatnot. So I think it'll be a while yet before another pup. But in terms of hunting, as many places as I can. I cut my teeth grouse and woodcock hunting in Wisconsin, particularly northeast Wisconsin. I lived in Wisconsin for a number of years, went to college there, and really that's where I fell in love with. Where'd you go to school? I went to Marquette in Milwaukee.
Oh, sure.
For my undergraduate degree.
Did you grow up in the Midwest here?
No, I'm from Massachusetts originally, so I've kind of moved around.
So second home.
Yeah, if you were to ask my wife, she would tell you I consider Wisconsin home, even now. So I moved there for college, moved away for graduate school and a bit of work, moved back, and then through different work opportunities, particularly for my wife, we relocated to North Carolina about 4 years ago. But I still get up to Wisconsin every year to grouse hunt and woodcock hunt. Obviously, with RGS, we spent a fair amount of time in Minnesota for the national hunt every year. So for the first time, I got to grouse and woodcock hunt in Minnesota last year, which was a phenomenal experience. And I actually was just up there having some visits with some folks a couple weeks ago, and I had an opportunity to work off my tailgate for a couple hours one day. So I spent some time in the chip just sitting on the tailgate on my laptop, and there were plenty of grouse out and about drumming. So I'm very excited to get back up there this fall.
Super nice. We're What area were you in? I mean, I don't want to get a hot spot or anything, but I mean, can you give us a little bit of a quadrant?
I would say, oh man, how do I do this and not hot spot?
Well, then don't worry about it. I mean,
I was around Marcel. Around.
Okay, well,
around and around is a big circle.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Okay. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's historically, I mean, even anywhere around that area is very good grouse cover.
Yeah. It was so, I was there and the leaves had like just started budding, but they weren't, they didn't have leaves on them, and it was like 50 degrees during the day, and it just felt like fall, and it kind of looked like fall, and I was like, man, why is it not October right now?
I know we've been on the podcast trying to make a little bit of a pivot into some fishing topics, and I already sat down and recorded an episode about planning my fall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a fair point, though. I did, on the way up there, I stopped with some friends and fished the driftless around Viroqua in Wisconsin. And that one day was mediocre, and one day was absolutely lights out. So if you have the opportunity to go out and go fishing, now's the time for sure.
Absolutely. What was hatching down there?
It was sort of the one day. It was sort of everything. I was fishing a dry dropper rig, and really like every other fish was every other one. They'd hit. I was running like a big stimulator and a scud nymph, and it's one of those days where I was like, man, it's what you want every time you go out, where like I said, every other cast is a fish. So yeah, for whatever reason that day it was just on fire. So I won't be forgetting that one anytime soon.
I swear my good friend, he goes out a couple times. Well, he's kind of in the heart of his work schedule now, but he had a little bit of break in early May and into April, and he was out like every day. And I swear, every day that I chose to go was the day that they weren't out. Yeah, it's just sometimes the luck, but yeah, you got to get out and enjoy it now. I mean, I think even some of the areas that I fish kind of the north driftless area, like Pierce County and Pepin County and Trempealeau County. And I think the sulfurs are coming off now. So
yeah, it's just a great time to be out on the water. For sure. Especially as it's warming up. And although you all just had the sort of boomerang of the weather, wasn't it? Recently, it's like 90 over the weekend, and then the next day was about 40.
Oh yeah, I guess that was like maybe 2 weeks. Was it? I can't remember now. I've been doing too many projects, and I haven't enjoyed enough outside weather to take advantage of it. So the 40-degree day was like, okay, project day. I'm trying to remember if it was last weekend, but yeah, we've been up and down, and we finally got some nice rain over here. So unfortunately, the streams are blowing out. I had plans to take somebody out this afternoon or I should say evening, and it ain't happening. But what can you do?
Yeah, no, I totally understand.
So do you when you were back here in Wisconsin, just a random question, but did you do any turkey hunting?
I did not. This year I've never been a huge turkey hunter, just because it's one of those things where I look at it in a very leery way, because I have plenty of hobbies as it is. And so I've been tree hunting a couple times, particularly with friends, but I've never dove into it head first, because it's just going to be one more thing. And, between the dogs and the fishing and work and all of that, it's like, I'm like, this is something I want to do, but there's a learning curve, and I'm going to need to go whole hog into it. I just don't have the time. And so this year, had too much travel and different things going on. So I steered clear of the turkey woods, but it looks like a lot of folks had really good success this year.
From what I can tell, yeah, my local area that I hunt, the guys banged them up early in the season already, and my uncle comes up from Florida every year, and this year he decided to get a turkey tag, and I do. I'm like you. I used to do it a lot before I had dogs and before I really got into fly fishing. But turkey hunting always came into that part of the season where it's I'd rather be doing other things, and I kind of put it on the back shelf. And I don't know. I bought a sportsman's license this past season, and I got a turkey tag with it, and somehow I forgot to apply. So I ended up getting the last season, which actually starts on Wednesday. And it's just one of those things where I'm scratching my head what I'm going to do on Saturday because I think Muskie opens. And
Yep.
it's like, and then one of these days I got to get back into dog training.
Yeah, it adds up. It really does. And so that's like I said, for me, I'm just like, look, we're going to leave that one on the burner for a little while.
Well, if you ever find yourself out here in the spring and you want to go and maybe not have such a steep learning curve, I'd be happy to take you out.
All right. Well, if I get back up there next spring, I'll definitely keep you posted.
Right on. Well, let's get into kind of some of the detail we kind of talked about. Well, actually, let me step out real quick before we kind of get into it. You're working with rough grouse every day. I mean, that's your job, and you got into that because of a love for hunting, right? And a love for hunting them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me, I got into bird dogs first, and I fell in love with wild places and chasing dogs for wild birds. And a really good friend took me grouse hunting, and I've always loved the woods. I grew up deer hunting in the Northeast, and there's just something to be said about exploring the woods and how sort of claustrophobic it is. And I really resonate with that. I like being up north. And I should say, even down here in North Carolina and Southeast, there's plenty of, shouldn't say plenty. There's covers here and grouse here to chase. Just the opportunity to be in the mountains and sort of get lost in the woods as soon as you step off trail is something that really resonates with me and speaks to me. And so, and I've realized through bird dogs and trying to learn how to hunt on public land that there's a lot of effort and time and resources needed to perpetuate this thing that we all love. And so for me, career wise, I eventually made the decision that I wanted to be a part of furthering that, and what better opportunity to do that by working to do that. And so that's what led me to the organization.
Yeah, I thank you guys a lot for what you do to coordinate all these efforts with, you've got county, you've got public, private, different interests, federal, state, the list goes on, to coordinate the effort to kind of keep that habitat growth and the young forest growth that grouse and woodcock need. It's really amazing when you really start stacking on the projects over years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And I can't thank you guys enough. So, I had a listener reach out kind of after our episode with Mark, and we kind of oftentimes on these shows talk about cover and aspen cuts. But we don't necessarily dive into kind of the details of why the birds are there and maybe exactly how one might look at a 20 or 38 acre aspen cut and tackle it. And I had a listener reach out and kind of, ask me, hey, I've been wandering through aspen cuts, is there a better way to hunt these?
Yeah.
And I was kind of curious if you might be able to answer that. And listeners from Chaska, Minnesota here, his name's Patrick, and he's been really kind to me and reached out. And I was kind of curious if you might be able to answer his question.
Yeah, I can tell you how I would.
I mean, I can give the answer too, but yeah, I'd like to hear it from somebody else.
Sure. Yeah. There's a number of ways to do it. I think what most people would say is hunt the edges, which is great. That's your sort of ballpark. Find a nice aspen cut with some good hard edges, with some more mature forest, and hunt it that way. Coming off the trailhead or the road or wherever. The challenge with that is you feel like you're leaving a lot of cover undone, or untouched, and everybody tends to, particularly if you're hunting a place that gets a lot of pressure, a decent amount of pressure, you feel like you're hunting the same way a lot of folks do. So one of my favorite ways to hunt a piece is to cut, is basically park and basically do a wide loop through the hardwood to the back of the cut and hunt my way out. And if I can, sort of touch both edges of the cut or the zigzag pattern, great. And that way you can work through the middle of that cut, and particularly in that middle, you'll find woodcock in the middle and grouse on the edges. You might get lucky and find a grouse in the middle too, but they're going to be more on the edges. But I'm big on push in, turn around, hunt out. As opposed to those birds get used to the pressure coming from the road, and they have those escape plans dialed in, whereas if you come in from the back, a lot of times you'll catch them off guard. And that's something that folks I hunt with and I have really made it point to pay attention to, and to try to do that more and more often, particularly if there's two of us with two dogs, and one will take one side and another will take the other side, and between the two of us and the two dogs, we cover a pretty wide swath of the cover, working our way out. I would also say, depending on the makeup of the inside of the cut, if you get some evergreen in there, like some balsam or spruce, that's intermixed in the cut, like try to hunt the whole thing. Honestly, it's like my guys I hunt with, a lot of times we look for what we call dirty cover, which is like younger aspen, but it's interspersed with that sort of evergreen conifer type of tree that's interspersed in the middle. And so they've got a lot of options and places to be. They can be in the conifer for cover. They've got food there and whatnot. And they don't really have to travel super far.
You got to stop giving away all my secrets here.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to call me up and say, hey, I need you to take me grouse hunting this fall.
Yeah. Well,
seriously, what you said though is I think some of the things that kind of drive some of the success that I have, because I look at, I look at it from Onyx or Google Earth, whatever, I do some homework, and then I try to work things exactly opposite of what the average guy would do. And I just find success that way, because the birds are expecting people to come in the trailhead or park the car there. And oftentimes I find when I park the car off the road in places that people normally don't park, I have a lot more success very close to the road too.
Yeah. I would say too, the other piece is, if you're hunting somewhere that's got a decent amount of pressure in the younger stuff, and there's good, like as RGS, one of the big things we talk about is that grouse need healthy landscapes. They need diverse, balanced landscapes from an age class diversity perspective. And so you might be hunting in an area with older hardwood, young aspen, and then that sort of middle age, or at least aged out aspen, that 25-year-old, 25-year-old, 30, maybe 40-year-old aspen, that might have some wetlands in the middle with some tag alder and conifers and things. Like if you've got that slightly older cut that's next to one of those younger cuts, and that younger cut's getting pounded, hunt the marginal stuff, because a lot of those birds will move out there because people won't go in them. And there's one of my best friends, he and I, late October, we love finding those more fringe spots because they're so overlooked, and they're next to great cover, so the bird can utilize that great cover if they need to, but they've been bounced around a little bit, and so they might look to that more marginal cover on the fringes just to hang out and get away from the pressure.
Yeah, great advice. I appreciate the tips here for the listeners and for Patrick specifically. I really, really do like that conifer cover too that you had touched on. We had a day last fall where we had gotten into an area that I had not hunted before, didn't do any scouting. It was just kind of, we were halfway through the day and birds weren't cooperating in the area that we were in, and I just let's drive 30 minutes and then hit some different cover. And we pulled into this area that had been logged off, but a lot of the there were islands of kind of white pine and I think some ponderosa pine mixed in, and it'd be like 4 or 5 trees, and maybe half a dozen smaller trees had grown up over the years around that, and the birds were not in the aspen, but they were on that edge. And every one of these little, I think we moved like 20 birds in about 3 hours in there, and that's including woodcock too. But it was a lesson that I was trudging forward, and my one buddy, he's like, well, I'm gonna hit this other edge, and sure enough, both 2 birds moved, and I'm like, all right, well, maybe we got a pattern here, and start trying to step and repeat that, and sure enough, it turned into I don't think we walked more than a mile, but it was just, we worked. And that's the other thing too. A lot of people want to breeze right through all these covers, and cuts real quickly. And sometimes the birds run and they don't necessarily, run that far. So if you just kind of slow down and slow up a little bit and let your dogs work a little bit better, and maybe even slow down for a second, take a break. I found some success that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. The sort of, I'm big on, as I'm working through a cut, sort of looking to where I can get to somewhere that's a little bit more open, and I'll work, say 5 to 10 steps to a place that's a little bit more open, where I've got a little bit of room where if something happens, I can shoot and stop, and let the dog work, and then look and find another spot and sort of piecemeal, my way forward. As opposed to sort of just the trudge, you'd be amazed, like you said, how many birds are more sitting there that the dog might have overran, or they just were on the wrong side of the wind or whatever. And by making that pause, it's an opportunity for that bird to sit and get a little bit nervous, and maybe they flush wild, or the dog comes around and finds that, there's so many things that can happen.
Yeah, and it's about creating that shot opportunity for yourself too. I mean, standing in thick aspen cut, it doesn't do anything for you. So moving to that open area, and maybe actually you kind of hustle there for a second, and then you actually wait 30 seconds instead of just kind of walking in. It is about creating that shot opportunity too. I tell a lot of people that, if you sit back and you just watch the dog and not really care about what you're standing in, 9 times out of 10, you're not even going to be able to swing a gun. So you got to get to that spot where you can swing a gun, and then you can hold up for a second, recheck with the other people you're hunting with, locate the dogs, and honestly, just regroup for a minute. You don't have to. I find that a lot of guys want to hit this and move on, hit it and move on, hit it and move on. And there's a lot to that. I mean, it is a numbers game to a certain degree, but there is the stop to smell the roses aspect of it a little bit too. And I find that the more time I take to kind of enjoy that scenery and enjoy the dog work, and it turns out better for me in the long run too with the bird count.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I was hunting this fall with a very good friend. They were new to grouse hunting, and the conversation I had with them was just that. They were getting frustrated. The birds were gone, and they're like, I'm never in a position to shoot. There's trees. And there's always going to be stuff in the way. Then every time a bird went, they seemed to be in a position where they couldn't get the gun up or swing or what have you. And that's exactly right. You'll be way better off if you pick how you walk through a cut or the edge of a cut by looking to where you can go to be in a position to raise your gun and shoot. And again, you're always going to have stuff in the way. The biggest learning curve for a grouse and woodcock hunter is learning to shoot through, right? But to be in a place where you can actually move the gun to get that done is going to put you way ahead of anybody else in the process or work in the forest. And if you're just sort of walking along willy-nilly and not paying attention to what's around you.
I always find it interesting when I take people along that have never really grouse hunted before. They've ran a dog, maybe they haven't. They've just walked trails through the woods and kind of kicked them up and shot them. We get into an aspen cut, and they're like, "You shooting here?" So
yeah, they can't fathom that that's a possibility.
Yeah, the success rate really comes from creating a shot opportunity for yourself and getting into that position and thinking about it really constantly as you're moving through the woods.
Yep, absolutely. So it sounds like Patrick got a lot more than he's bargained for, but hopefully that helps him tag a few more birds this fall.
Well, hey, as long as that helps motivate people to get out and visit some of the places that you guys are working on, the bird count doesn't matter. It's really about getting people outdoors and creating awareness and having people enjoy these healthy forests.
Absolutely. No, I very much appreciate that.
So what do you guys have going on in the area up here in Minnesota and Wisconsin? I know that's kind of one of the reasons we wanted to have you on the show today was to discuss some of these new things that you had going on.
Yeah, particularly I would say chat more about Minnesota than Wisconsin, particularly because you're located in Minnesota. And remind me, where exactly in Minnesota are you located?
So currently, I'm in the cities. We bought a small farm, and over in Northwest Wisconsin. So we're in the process of kind of shifting things around and laying the foundation to move out there. Hopefully, in the next couple of years. I would like to say the next year, but I have a significant other, and that's kind of a compromise for her. So we're working on that.
Team sport.
But yeah, I'll be back in Wisconsin, hopefully with a residency there soon enough, so I can get my guide license over there.
Gotcha. No, totally understand.
But nothing against Minnesota. But yeah, I hunt in Minnesota about half the season. I spend maybe a little bit less, a little bit more time in Wisconsin.
Gotcha.
Just because it's a knowledge-based thing, hunting there for so many years and grown up there. How many waypoints do you have,
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, don't, my Onyx looks like just a giant red balloon if you look at the state of Wisconsin. So, I certainly get that. But from broadly, I would say from a Wisconsin perspective.
But I will tell you this though, real quick, and again, sorry to interject, but
no, you're.
When I do hunt Minnesota, I actually tend to hunt more of your Ruffed Grouse Society habitat restoration project areas. I just think, awesome. Yeah, there's one north of the cities here, and I know everybody kind of knows about it, but it's Four Brooks. It's just a great place to go find woodcock in the spring or in the early part of the season. And you guys, just the number of age classes that you have in there and the way you guys manage those pieces are awesome. And that's kind of, again, why I wanted to have you on the show. And regardless of we're talking about Minnesota, Wisconsin, or wherever, I think it's kind of relevant for everybody listening.
No, absolutely. And part of the reason I want to talk about what we're doing in Minnesota is it's indicative of where we're going as an organization and representative of our transition to this forest conservation director model. And so the biggest thing that for us to talk about in the state of Minnesota is our partnership with the Chippewa National Forest, particularly are doing shared stewardship with the CHIP in a number of different capacities. So, for example, just this past year, we worked with them on a stewardship agreement where we were actually just nearing the completion of over 130 acre sale that's going to basically create that 130 acres of young forest habitat, particularly aspen, on the Chippewa. I don't want to. We had the hot spotting conversation earlier, so I don't want to share exactly where it's on the Black Duck District, but that's part of our new model is working with the Forest Service and us to do work on their behalf. So for example, we're doing this timber sale on the Chippewa. We get reimbursed for our time. They get the work done, and then any of the money that's left over from that sale will stay on the district. So it'll stay in the Black Duck District. So we've actually already outlined how we're going to use that extra money, from the timber sale. So we basically were slated to maintain, improve, or create up to 88 miles of hunter walking trails in the Black Duck District.
Did you say 88 miles?
88 miles. Yep.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. And that also includes improving access in a number of areas, particularly through gate replacement. A lot of those areas, through storms and vandalism and whatnot, people tear the gates out or trees fall on them and whatnot, and the roads all get torn up. And then the Forest Service has to invest in fixing those roads so we can get in there and do timber management and different things. And so for us, what an opportunity to partner, right? As a nonprofit that's aimed at forest conservation for the benefit of grouse and woodcock, we know that we need related professional habitat. So not only are we creating that, with this one particular project, so that's over 130 acres of habitat that we've created, in that project is making money. It reimburses us for our time, and then the money that's over, what we get reimbursed for our time, we're using to put into this trail maintenance, replace gates, and then also do non-commercial timber treatment. So working on like invasive species management and whatnot in the area to make that forest that much more healthy and improve it so that we can go in and do another project in the district, in another area based off those improvements. So it's really exciting. We've talked a lot about this transition of this forest conservation director model and what it'll look like. And here we have an example where the proof is in the pudding. We've already done it. And it's been great because of the success in the Black Duck district, the Deep River and Walker Ranger districts are in active conversations with us to basically do that on those districts as well. So, it sort of perpetuates itself. Once we do a project in one particular area, the rest of the Forest Service, those rangers see what we're doing and the success we're having, and they want to be a part of that. Similar here in the Southeast, we're experiencing that on the Daniel Boone. We're doing a bunch of projects in Kentucky, and that really started with one agreement and getting that off the ground, and that has led to them wanting to do more with us.
That's really encouraging because I think, at least myself, and I'm sure some of the listeners may kind of gravitate towards this comment, but when I go from county forest land that buds up to national forest, the amount of habitat that is available for a hunter to hunt grouse diminishes very, very quickly because of the way that the national forest is traditionally kind of managed forest. So are you kind of implying that there's a little bit of a different mentality and that people might over the next few years start to see more frequency in the amount of logging that's done in the national forest due to some of your efforts as a group?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. I would caution though that county forests exist for different reasons than national forests, right? The national forest system was established by Theodore Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot, and that's sort of for the greatest good for the greatest number and managing those lands over time, right? Both for people and for wildlife and the resources that are present, timber being one of them, in a sustainable fashion. Whereas county forests are revenue generation for county, right? Like that's why they exist, which is why you tend to see more habitat available on county forests as they cut more often. That said, I wish I had the stats in front of me. I apologize for the Chippewa, but there certainly is more opportunity to be doing more active timber management on the national forest and to be creating more habitat and cutting more. I know that the percentage isn't this low on the Chippewa, but for example, what we face here in North Carolina, we have the Pisgah-Nantahala National Forest, in what young forest habitat should comprise about 10 to 14% of a million acres. What we have is like 1 to 1.5%. So we're coming to the table and saying, look, you have these goals. We all know that this is what the percentage should be. You don't have the capacity to achieve these goals. We're here to bring that capacity for you. Let us help you and do that. And we're doing the same thing on the Chippewa or in Wisconsin on the Nicolet and Schwamigan. We're working on trying to do similar in Michigan and here on Manistee. All of these areas where grouse and woodcock are prevalent and would benefit from more active timber management, we're trying to come to the Forest Service and be partners and say, look, you have capacity issues and resource issues in terms of getting this done, let us work with you and help you get those over the finish line.
That's awesome to hear. I would love nothing more to hunt more national forest land. I tend to be a county land kind of guy just because of the amount of habitat, and it is a competing interest. I think, the people look at the national forest as kind of this untouched landscape, and they kind of expect that. So and being national, there's more of a larger voting pool than people to stand up and say no logging, where the county forest
sure.
is much, it's a much smaller entity and can really, I think, the circle of knowledge there, the people in the community see that and see the money that they save on their tax rolls and things like that, where it's a much bigger dynamic on the national level. So that's kind of why I asked.
No, absolutely. And you hit on something that's really important there, and that's public perception and awareness. And that's something that we've really leaned into organizationally. In the fall, we hired a communications and marketing director in Ashley Peters. She's actually Minnesota based. She lives in the cities, and it's just been fantastic for us in helping us better communicate all the work that we're doing and convey the importance of young forest habitat in the conversation around healthy, diverse, resilient, balanced forests, right? And that is something that we all, she wrote a great piece in our covers magazine for the spring about we all need to be ambassadors for this message. That I joke, I have a sticker on my water bottle that says little trees need hugs too. And I used to work in higher education, and people, we'd be in a meeting and somebody inevitably would raise their hand and be like, I'm sorry, but I hate to be that person, but could you print a copy of this so I could have it? Apologizing, for asking for a printed copy. And it was always my moment where I'd be like, look, never apologize for that. As long as it's not an excess, but birds and wildlife, and little trees need hugs too, and they rely on early successional habitat. You can't just have old growth. And to really help folks understand that having 10 to 14 or 15% of young forest as a part of our national forest is necessary to create these environments that are rich with wildlife and actually have legitimately healthy ecosystems versus just sort of seeds of middle or old growth. We have to have all three.
I can't agree with. I've actually talked to Ashley a little bit. She kindly reminded me that my membership had lapsed.
Oh, she got you perfect.
Oh yeah, I tried to get on the Facebook group, and she's like, your membership has lapsed. I'm like, oh really? Okay. And then I re-upped to one of the advocacy memberships just because I felt so bad.
Yeah, well, we thank you for that, and I would say, and if she listens to this, Ashley, with the utmost complimentary nature, she is a shark about that, and I so appreciate it. She's committed to helping expand our membership, and that is one of the cool things that RGS members only Facebook page has gotten more and more attention as we've gone on over the last year. And folks post really great things, and just trying to foster this community, similar to that question that you asked with Patrick, create a space where folks can come in and ask questions and have an environment where they're going to get, a good, legitimate answer that we can trust. And she manages all of that and does fantastic work. But she is a stickler. Like, if you're not a member, she's checking. I appreciate that.
In today's, last year's non-banquet environment, if you want to, join the Facebook group and she can convert a new member, hey, you got to take every opportunity you can get today.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact of the matter too with that is that 90 cents on the dollar of that membership is going to habitat improvement, going to some of these projects that I just talked about. So it really comes down to making it a better landscape for all of us.
Exactly. We really kind of covered a lot of the topics I wanted to kind of cover, but at the end of the day, the habitat is so important. And I've covered this with some biologists and other people in roles like yourself with other organizations. It's habitat. And it's important for recruitment. It's important for retention for new hunters. It's important to have for birds on the landscape, for deer, for turkeys, for all of it. If you don't have this early successional forest and your work out there kind of pushing these organizations to get that number up to what is, really sustainable. I mean, and we, I guess people, perception wise and stuff, they don't understand as well. And when we came onto the landscape here, we kind of started farming, changed everything, and we stopped. Our fire management over the last 100 years has changed so much, especially down in like your region of the country. That's a fire prone landscape, much like a couple areas here in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And if you're not actively managing that and you're putting out every fire in that area, you're not getting the elements within that habitat that create the young forage for deer and all the brood cover and all the things that you need to kind of create this abundance of wildlife we all talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's so many factors at play. It's hard, like a lot of people will say that now we just need to take a completely hands-off approach, but it's hard to agree with that because we've, like, as you said, we've had such a hand in the landscape for so long. My argument would be if we took our hands completely out of the landscape and didn't manage it in accordance with what science shares and sort of historical, appropriate practices, right? We don't want to, by no means do we want to cut everything down and only have early successional habitat. We really do want the mix of old growth and the middle-aged growth and that young forest. But at this point, we've had such hands in the landscape that to take our hands out of the landscape would be negligent. For both the forest and for wildlife and all of those types of things, because the fact of the matter is we're always going to manage for fire, right? We've got property and homes and life that would be impacted if we didn't manage for fire. So no matter what, we are doing something. So how do we do that intelligently?
In California and a lot of these western states with the beetle kill and them not managing that forest, this just shows you what happens when you don't manage the forest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
The hands-off approach really doesn't work because nature's going to come through and do something no matter what. And if we're on the landscape, it's going to change. And, who knows exactly what the variables are in the shift and the dynamics going to be. And if we don't have a part in kind of playing a role in that, it just turns out devastating for people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So what else do you have going on up here in the Midwest? Any other projects that you want to talk about?
That's a good question. One of the things that, particularly in Minnesota, that's really exciting is that we are part of the Minnesota Moose Habitat Collaborative. See, that's really interesting, right? Like, why would the Ruffed Grouse Society be working on a moose project? But the really neat thing is that we've joined this moose collaborative, and through that we put in a project through the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council, and through that we've received, I believe it's official, we've received about $1.5 million to work on moose habitat restoration. And so what we're going to be doing is restoring over 1,500 acres, particularly in northern Minnesota, around moose habitat. But again, that early succession, a lot of that is early successional habitat because that is important for moose. And so that, to your point earlier about managing this, for us, our grouse and woodcock are our flagship, and we call them the bellwether, right? So if things are impacting grouse and woodcock negatively, it's an indicator that something is wrong systemically. So if we do the work to make sure that grouse and woodcock are healthy on the landscape, then the landscape itself is healthy, and that impacts things like moose, for example. And so it's something, for me, I think that it really illustrates that while we're here for the grouse and woodcock piece, what we're doing benefits so many other species, whether that's deer. You and I were talking about turkeys earlier, in landscapes that have moose, black bears, as well as, to take even just game species out, the amount of migratory songbirds and warblers and all those types of things, they all benefit. And so for us, we're really leaning into, yes, this is about grouse and woodcock, it's what's best for them, but really there is a litany of other things that are impacted by the work that we're trying to do. And it is, for us, at the end of the day, it's about that sort of whole ecosystem balance and health.
Makes a lot of sense because, all of you, you look at Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, Sage Grouse Initiative, Minnesota Sharptail Society. They're all trying to improve habitats. And I think that you'll see, I hope, over the next number of years, more partnerships with these groups because the interests overlap. And much like moose and grouse are not necessarily correlated in a hunter's mind, but from a habitat management side, they both benefit from that early successional forest because it was on the landscape naturally before we started logging and before, we've taken a number of different approaches that we've taken over the last few decades to centuries.
For sure.
So speaking of that, any other partnership with NGOs that you guys are seeing across the country that are having success in anything from habitat management to getting kids outdoors?
Yeah. From a habitat management perspective, I think one of the things that's really exciting that we're still in the early stages of, but working, you mentioned like Pheasants Forever or Quail Forever, is working with them in different areas of the country around quail habitat, particularly here in the Southeast, for example. What opportunities can we do to work with them to bolster both of their efforts, but also do things that are good for quail and good for woodcock and grouse for that matter, particularly if there is regional overlap. So, for example, I hunted this past year in an area, it was late in the season, but it was an area that had grouse and quail. And if it hadn't gotten cold and pushed all the woodcock out, there would have been woodcock there too. And so for us, we really look at it as how is this an opportunity for us to come together with other organizations can meet mutual goals. One of the things that we're working on in Pennsylvania is a giant collaborative in 3 different regions of Pennsylvania with the American Bird Conservancy around grouse and woodcock habitat, but also golden wing warbler habitat. And so how can we all come together to do these hundreds of acres of forest improvement projects through both cutting, prescribed fire, in the number of tools in the tool belt that impact all of these things. And you wouldn't think, that the Ruffed Grouse Society, American Woodcock Society, organizations that have pretty strong hunting backgrounds would partner with an organization like the American Bird Conservancy. But we're doing it. We've brought in, we've worked with them to do NIFWIF grants to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars to put this habitat work on the ground. And that's something, again, with the shift towards forest conservation directors, we're actively working to be able to do that in every region that we have a presence. And so for me, as somebody, we were talking, we started with me coming to Ruffed Grouse Society. So I've been with RGS and AWS for almost a year now. And part of the thing that's so exciting to work for this organization is our potential. I think about where we'll be in terms of all of the work we'll be accomplishing in the next handful of years, and the sky is the limit. So, not only in Minnesota and Wisconsin and more traditional ranges, but, all the way, through the northern tier of the country and then down the Appalachian chain to the Southeast, there's just so much opportunity. And particularly our delivery folks are working so hard to make sure we're taking advantage of every chance we have.
That's really awesome to hear because there's a lot of competition for the conservation dollars right now. And I think sometimes, people view RGS is so regionally based and heavily based in areas where grouse and woodcock are more prevalent. And so it's really neat to hear that you guys are working with other organizations and then almost in a sense competing organizations to accomplish overall goals. Because habitat for warblers, and I don't know that maybe a lot of the listeners understand that tie-in. The warblers have a lot of the different species have taken a huge dive in numbers over the years, and they're an indicator species, much like quail is, and quail habitat And for forestry, to hear you guys working on those competing interest goals and finding that common ground when you might not have initially on face value have common ground, that's really awesome. I think if you guys can keep that going, the partnerships are really endless.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. And like I said, in every region of the country where we are, is to be able to be making that impact and developing those partnerships.
Yeah, and I can personally speak to it. You know, I told you a little earlier that I bought a small farm, and within the first 3 months, I had made a phone call to RGS and Pheasants Forever, because I did have overlapping habitat. I'm right on the edge in Wisconsin where there's decent pheasant numbers and there's some grouse numbers. And I had, an old aspen stand and an old growth field. So it was kind of, I had to have both of them there, and I had both field biologists out, and they gave me a plan. And, whether or not I go with a national plan or just kind of try to at least use their plans and kind of do it on my own, because it's a smaller acreage farm. It's only 32 acres. So there's not a whole lot that is attractive for a logging company,
Sure.
Especially when you start talking about pulpwood. But at the end of the day, the ability to impact the landscape in two different ways for me was very interesting, and actually one of the reasons why I bought the property. So can you maybe touch on and maybe urge, the listeners that might have private land that haven't considered having your group out to take a look at habitat management plans? Can you kind of give the listeners a little skinny on what that might look at and why they should take advantage of it?
Yeah, absolutely. From a number of areas, right? So the reason that private lands are important is because there's so much of it. First and foremost, right? So we spend a lot of time talking about working with public land, particularly federal and state agencies, and that's important from an access perspective, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing work to improve populations where folks can go experience them, and that where that is public land opportunities. The challenge is, though, is if we're not leaning in and doing the work on private land, depending on where you are, the percentage of private land is astronomical. And so we can, in good faith, neglect all of that territory and opportunity, right? So for us, on the conservation delivery side, we've partnered with NRCS in a number of areas to have more private land focused positions. To be able to go out and meet with landowners like yourself, and if there's opportunity, develop a wildlife action plan or a forestry plan, as well as if the opportunity exists to connect you to a variety of conservation programs that will help you enact that plan, and may also contribute some funds from the government through different programs like EQIP and whatnot, to help you achieve your conservation goals on your property. And so for us, it's a no-brainer. If we can work with NRCS and work with private landowners and sort of triangulate all of these opportunities for a landowner for the benefit of a healthy forest landscape and increased populations of grouse and woodcock, why wouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. It's especially in certain areas of the country, the amount of public land is very limited, and the impact that you can make on public land is really almost minute. So private land, in order to have that wildlife spill over into some of these public land areas and accessed areas, you have to have a healthy forest around there. And it's not just the 40 acres that butt up to it. It's the township, because birds move, and the healthier habitat you have in abundance, and it's too. I think I talked to one of the Wisconsin biologists, and she was talking about how the grouse in Wisconsin and Minnesota were less affected by West Nile, and it's down to the amount of habitat that we have, and you look in these areas, and it's through managed forest crop and other different programs. It's heavily managed. And so the biology of it is that the grouse is less affected by disease and things like that. And you being out east, your grouse populations were really affected by it. And, that has to do a lot with the amount of habitat there is. So the partnership with private landowners, especially I think out east, even more so is astronomically important.
Yeah, absolutely. And what they found that you mentioned West Nile. So for example, really the hotbed where folks are really looking at West Nile is Pennsylvania. And Lisa Williams, who's the biologist and really spearheading on the state of Pennsylvania, what she noticed, so both last year and this year, is that it was a drier year. So it was a worse year for mosquitoes, which helped spread West Nile. And what they found is we've been preaching this model, right? Like the habitat is key to help these birds be more resilient and recover. And what we found is that because it was drier years, that those birds have bounced back significantly. And so, while we will have to contend with West Nile, and we haven't found a cure or a way to eradicate that, what we do know is that is it going to impact the birds to a certain extent? Yeah. But as long as that quality habitat exists, those birds can stay on the landscape. When they get a break from the mosquitoes in West Nile in those drier years, they rebound that much more rapidly. And so to your point, with Wisconsin, with that managed forest land and on the private side, as well as the work done both on state agency and federal land, the more opportunity those birds have to be successful in obviously propagating.
Exactly. So it's paramount. So can you speak to any of the things that you guys might have coming up to drive some memberships this year? Are you guys getting back on the banquet wagon? Am I going to be able to go spend some money and win some things like I have in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. With things coming back to normal and folks getting vaccinated and things opening up, absolutely, we're getting out there. So if folks are interested in seeing what's out there, I encourage them to go to ruffedgrousesociety.org and check out our events page. I do know there's already things up there. There's groups that are planning events for the coming months, whether that be sporting clay shoots or your more traditional banquet or get together, all the way up to, I believe we've already posted our grouse camp for the fall in Wisconsin. So if folks are interested in learning more about how to go about grouse hunting and learning from a really well-rounded community that's about getting folks outdoors and introducing them or helping them become better grouse and woodcock hunters, check out that grouse camp opportunity in Wisconsin. And like you said, from the banquet perspective, those things are getting up and running on a chapter by chapter basis. So check out that event page. It's exciting to try to be back to that, as well as just from a membership perspective. We had a really successful spring membership drive in March. That was fantastic. So kudos to our membership team from that perspective. And I do know that they're planning, they're trying to plan a smaller membership drive here in June, and then obviously we'll have something in the fall as well.
Awesome. I'll make sure to include some of that information in the show notes.
Thank you. Yeah. And, folks that are listening, if they aren't members, I strongly encourage them to check us out and become one. Like I said earlier, about 90 cents on every dollar goes towards our conservation delivery. So your money is certainly well spent. And it's our 60th anniversary. So what better way to help us celebrate our anniversary than contributing and becoming a member?
Yeah, you guys are one of the oldest conservation groups in America, and that it just goes to show. I think, you've been taken off the spotlight by the call of the uplands a little bit this year. So I'm glad we were able to have you back on and can shine a little more light on healthy forests and hopefully drive some memberships for you guys.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, Brian. We thank you very much for the opportunity.
So I guess in closing, unless I should give you the soapbox just in case I missed anything that you wanted to talk about today.
I think we had a pretty robust conversation that touched on a lot of points. I really appreciate it. I can't help but plug one more time for folks. If they're not following the Ruffed Grouse Society on Facebook or Instagram, I encourage them to. With that membership we were talking about, that members only Facebook page. And for folks that might be members but might be wondering what else they can do, think about those that are in your community, your hunting buddies or family or friends that have an appreciation for healthy forests and abundant wildlife and forest health resilience and consider getting them a gift membership. Or, for me, with my group of friends, it's more just hazing them into reminding them that they should be a member or renew that membership. So, please don't hesitate to help us expand the community. That's how we're going to continue to make the impact that we are and expand on them, is to have our membership community grow. So, and everybody can have a part in that.
I agree. One other good idea, and my good buddy Jeff, who's been a little bit of guest hosting here on the podcast, he has a grouse camp every year, and last year what he did was he went out and bought hats for everybody, and he just gave everybody a Ruffed Grouse Society hat, and it's dollars, and you guys got to pay for some of that stuff, but your return on investment, at least for a hat, you guys are getting some money. So even if you're not going to buy a membership, or you all have memberships already, and you throw a little grouse camp, buy 4 hats for your buddies and bring them up to grouse camp this year.
Yeah, buy some swag and support us and represent that you're a member. The more folks that are out there and proud, the better. So, I definitely agree with that. Thank you.
I guess the last question I got for you today, you got any big trips planned for the fall?
Oof. Yeah. I'll be in Minnesota, October, Wisconsin. I'm going to try to make a run to the Northeast. I'm from the Northeast originally, but I've never grouse hunted over there, so I kind of got to cross that off my list at some point. If I can manage some vacation time, I would like to go to Kansas or Oklahoma for quail. I haven't put anything in stone on my calendar, but I have big ideas, and I will make those work as much as I can. But for sure, at some point I'll be in Minnesota and Wisconsin chasing birds, and then obviously everything on the home front. We've got a really great woodcock season down here in North Carolina, which is always super fun. And I make it a point to go run around the mountains and remind myself that not everywhere in the country has as great a grouse hunting as the Midwest. So plenty of opportunity and trips planned.
You definitely have to remind yourself, that you're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy, once in a while.
Yeah. I mean, it's what I would tell folks too is that, it's just different. I think it's much more of an adventure down here, finding places and exploring and finding birds. And the goal is to get us back to the point where there is much more habitat down here and more bird opportunity for grouse in the mountains. Like I said, we're facing that uphill battle. But yeah, it definitely makes me that much more appreciative for my time in the Midwest, and more populous areas of moving birds, to be down here and only move a half a dozen birds in a day versus if you don't move a half a dozen birds in the morning in the Midwest, you're very frustrated.
Been there though. I have been there.
Absolutely. Me too.
The woodcock takeoff. I mean, and I had it happen a couple of years ago where it was just, I think it was mid-October. It was a little early and it just dumped snow on us and it got super cold. Woodcock disappeared all in like one day. And, the grouse had just completely done that winter shift. And it takes a day sometimes.
Absolutely.
Although I've had late December hunts up in the middle of, kind of north central Minnesota where, if you're lucky to see a bird all day, it can get very, very difficult late season. You ever hunted up here in the late season?
Not Minnesota. I've hunted Wisconsin late season. And it is
January. I mean,
very different.
Back in the January.
Yeah,
days.
well, I did hunt January a number of years ago when I lived there, but even this year I hunted between Christmas and New Year's, and it's a different ball game for sure. Like you said, the crutch of woodcock is not present, so you better be dialed in. Yeah, and you better take advantage of the opportunities when they come.
Yeah, they tend to group back up a little bit, and it's kind of feast or famine. Either you're in them or you're not.
Yep, absolutely. That's what makes it fun. You have how they are in September and October, and then the season goes, and it makes you pivot styles. Every time you go out, which makes it that much more fun.
Yeah, it kind of makes you earn it a little bit harder each day as the season progresses after woodcock season's over.
For sure.
You ever been out west? You ever done any sage grouse or like desert quail?
No, it is on my bucket list for sure. But being particularly here in North Carolina, this far east, it is hard to get that far west. But it is certainly in my plans. Just need to really lay out how I can achieve such things with my own dog. So definitely want to at some point.
Yeah, it's I'm been blessed with the opportunity with a little bit more freedom this year, and I'm working on getting to a trip put together for sharp tails and sage grouse, and we'll see what else I can knock off my list while I'm in Wyoming.
Yeah, excellent. I hope you enjoy it.
I've been out there. I fly fishing, and been out to Colorado many times now, elk hunting, but I every time I go, I leave the dogs at home, and the last couple times I've been out there, I keep kicking myself. So I'm really happy just to be going for bird hunting this time.
Nice, excellent.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. And when you get back here this fall, look me up. I'd like to, kick around the brush with you for a day or so.
Absolutely, Brian. That would be such a privilege. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Well, you have a nice afternoon, and we'll be in touch here as I kind of get things wrapped up here with the show.
Excellent. And thank you again for having me. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
You too. Thank you for listening to another episode of this podcast. I am so grateful for all you listeners, for the opportunity to bring you this content. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, you know the drill. Join your local conservation effort, like I always say. If you're going to take something from the landscape, be willing to put something back. And if that's your dollar or your work, make sure you get it done. God bless America.